My father is a world-renowned surgeon, famous for inventing a life-saving procedure. I just discovered his private research notes. The procedure is a complete sham. The high survival rate is because he secretly screens for and only operates on patients who are misdiagnosed and never sick at all. The leather of the journal feels slick and cold beneath my trembling fingers, a stark contrast to the humid, oppressive air in my father's study. Rain lashes against the tall windows, each drop sounding like a tiny stone striking glass. The room, usually a sanctuary of mahogany, worn leather, and the comforting scent of old paper, now feels like a tomb. A monument to a lie so vast, so meticulously crafted, that my mind can't seem to find its edges. The journal lies open on the massive oak desk, its pages filled with my father's familiar, precise script. It's a handwriting I've seen my whole life on birthday cards and prescriptions, a script I once associated with genius and compassion. Now it looks like the scrawling of a monster. I was only in here to find a photograph. That's the sick irony of it all. He's receiving the Callahan Prize next week, another Lifetime Achievement Award for his groundbreaking work in neuro-oncology. They wanted a picture of him from the early days, back when he was developing the Vance procedure. I was digging through the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet, past old tax returns and university diplomas, when my fingers brushed against a false bottom. It was subtle, just a slight give in the wood. Inside was this journal. Not a medical file, but a personal log, bound in dark green leather with no title on the spine. A secret. At first, the entries were just dense medical jargon, notes on cellular degradation and patient prognoses. But then the patterns started to emerge. He never called it misdiagnosis. He was too clever for that. He used a term, diagnostic ambiguity, and assigned a numerical value to it. The higher the number, the more likely the initial scans were, in his words, overly assertive. He wasn't curing stage 4 glioblastoma. He was finding patients whose scans showed anomalies, cysts, benign growths, even imaging artifacts that other, less experienced doctors had flagged as malignant. He called them favorable profiles. He would then swoop in the celebrated Dr. Alistair Vance, the last hope, and recommend his proprietary procedure, an elegant, minimally invasive surgery that in reality did next to nothing. It was a performance, a piece of medical theater that allowed the patient's healthy body to miraculously recover from a disease it never had. My stomach churns, and I have to grip the edge of the desk to keep from being sick. I see a name in the journal. Helen Albright. And I remember her. She was on the news a decade ago, a mother of 3 who was given 6 months to live. My father saved her. I remember her tearful press conference, how she called my father a miracle worker sent from God. I was so proud. I was 14, and my father was a superhero. In his notes next to her name is a simple, chilling annotation. CM marker, 97%. Favorable outcome, virtually guaranteed. CM, clinical misdiagnosis. He wasn't a doctor saving a life. He was a gambler playing with loaded dice, betting on a sure thing. All the accolades, the grants, the wing of the hospital named after him, it was all built on the terrified relief of people who were never dying in the first place. The whole world sees him as a saint. I see him on television, his calm, reassuring face, the gentle authority in his voice as he talks about giving people back their lives. My life has been defined by his reflection, the son of the great Dr. Vance. I've lived in the shadow of a lie. The pictures on the wall seem to mock me now. Him shaking hands with presidents, him holding up awards, his arm around my mother, who died believing her husband was the greatest man she'd ever known. My own hands, the ones I inherited from him, feel alien to me. I always thought they were the hands of a healer's son. What are they now? A low rumble of thunder shakes the house, and in the sudden silence that follows, I hear a new sound, the distinct, metallic click of a key turning in the front door lock. He's home early. The leather journal suddenly feels like it weighs 100 pounds. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. He can't find me in here. He can't know. The sound of the heavy front door closing echoes up the grand staircase, each footstep on the marble floor below a drumbeat marking my final seconds of peace. My muscles lock, every instinct screaming at me to run, to disappear. But there's nowhere to go. His footsteps are slow, measured, the sound of a man completely at ease in his own domain. My domain is the suffocating room with this toxic book open on the desk. I slam the journal shut. The slap of leather on paper is a gunshot in the quiet house. My breath catches in my throat. I pivot, my movements clumsy and loud, yanking open the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. The drawer slides on its metal runners with a low groan of protest. My hands are slick with sweat as I fumble with the journal, trying to fit it back into its hiding place. It feels thicker now, heavier with the weight of its secrets, refusing to slide back into its hiding place. His keys jangle as he sets them down on the hall table. A soft thud follows. His briefcase. He's home. He's here. I force the journal into the space, my knuckles scraping against the rough wood. The false bottom won't sit flush. A corner is sticking up, a tiny, damning imperfection. There's no time. I shove it down hard, and a sickening crack echoes from the wood. I freeze, listening. The footsteps have stopped. Is he listening, too? A long, agonizing silence stretches. Then the footsteps resume, moving towards the grand staircase. I slide the drawer shut. It doesn't close smoothly. It catches, then closes with a loud, definitive click that seems to reverberate through my entire skeleton. I stand up too quickly, the blood rushing from my head, and the room sways. My reflection in the dark window is a pale, terrified ghost. I smooth the rug with my foot where I'd scuffed it, push his heavy leather chair back under the desk, my eyes darting around the room, searching for any other sign of my intrusion. I slip out of the study, pulling the heavy door closed until I hear the softest latch. I turn and find myself face to face with him. He's standing at the top of the stairs, halfway to the landing, his overcoat still on, droplets of rain glistening on the dark wool of his shoulders. His hair, silver at the temples, is perfectly in place. He looks tired, but his eyes, the same blue as my own, are sharp. They miss nothing. A faint, benign smile touches his lips, but it doesn't reach his eyes. They're scanning me, my disheveled state, my panicked breathing. He knows. He must know. "Daniel," he says, his voice the same calm, resonant baritone that has reassured thousands of patients. It sounds like a threat. "I didn't expect to see you up here." My own voice is a stranger to me, thin and reedy. I was looking for that photograph, for the Callahan Prize, the one from your residency. The lie is suffocating, made worse because it's rooted in the truth. It was my reason for being here before I stumbled into the abyss. He continues up the stairs, his gaze unwavering. Yes, the committee is quite thorough. He stops a few feet from me, and the familiar scent of his cologne, sandalwood and antiseptic, washes over me, making my stomach clench. And any luck finding it? No, not yet. I was just about to give up. I gesture vaguely down the hall, away from the study. Anywhere but there. He nods slowly, his eyes drifting past me to the closed study door. For a heart-stopping second, I'm certain he's going to walk over, open it, and see the filing cabinet that won't close quite right, or the microscopic crack in the false bottom. He'll know. The world will end. Instead, he turns his attention back to me. He places a heavy hand on my shoulder. His touch, once a source of comfort and pride, feels like a brand. I fight the urge to flinch away from him. "You look exhausted, son," he says, his brow furrowing with practiced concern. "Burning the midnight oil at the lab?" I can only manage a nod, my throat too tight for words. The man standing before me, the monster wearing my father's face, is a stranger. He built our life, my life, on the hope of people he knew were already safe, on the fear of families he was actively deceiving. The hand on my shoulder squeezes gently, a gesture of paternal affection that is now just another part of the performance. "Don't work too hard," he says, finally dropping his hand and walking past me toward his bedroom. "There's a place for ambition, but nothing is more important than precision."
Details, Daniel. The little things are what matter most. Never forget that. He doesn't look back, but his words hang in the air between us, a cold and deliberate warning. He knows. He doesn't know what I found, not yet, but he knows I was somewhere I shouldn't have been, and I know he's telling me that he will find out. I stand frozen in the hallway, the echo of his footsteps fading as his bedroom door closes down the hall. For a long moment, I don't breathe. I just listen to the frantic drumming of my own heart. The air is thick with his warning, a poison that has already begun to seep into my veins. The little things. He saw the faint scuff on the rug. He saw the way the study door wasn't perfectly lined in its frame. He saw the sweat on my brow. He didn't need to know the secret, to know that I was hiding one. The weight of his hand is still on my shoulder, a phantom pressure that makes my skin crawl. This house, my home for more than 20 years, suddenly feels like a meticulously constructed stage for a play I never knew I was in. Every painting, every piece of furniture is a prop. Every memory is a scripted line. My feet finally unstick from the plush runner. I move with a stealth I didn't know I possessed, my body still coiled with adrenaline. I descend the grand staircase, my hand ghosting over the polished banister, half expecting it to feel cold and dead. In the cavernous foyer, the portraits of our family line the walls. My ancestors, stern and unsmiling, seem to watch me with judgmental eyes. But it's the large portrait of my mother, hanging opposite the front door, that stops me. It was painted the year before she got sick. Her smile is genuine, her eyes full of a light I barely remember. She's looking at the artist, but it feels like she's looking at my father, who would have been standing just beside him, directing the pose. She loved him so completely. She died believing he was a miracle worker, a gift to the world. A wave of nausea, hot and acidic, rises in my throat. He didn't just lie to the world, he lied to her. He let her die proud of a monster. A cold, hard fury begins to crystallize around my fear, giving it a new and dangerous edge. I grab my keys from the bowl on the hall table, the same place he just set his down. The metal is cold against my clammy palm. I don't bother with a coat. I just need to get out. The heavy oak door clicks shut behind me, the sound of final, definitive severing. The cool night air is a shock, the rain having softened to a fine mist that clings to my face and hair. I get into my car, the engine turning over with a familiar rumble that is the only comforting sound I've heard all evening. As I pull away from the curb, I look back at the house. It's all lit up, a beacon of wealth and prestige on a quiet, tree-lined street. A perfect facade. Inside, the devil's probably taking off his shoes, humming a tune from the opera, completely untroubled. Driving through the slick city streets, the neon lights blur into streaks of color across my windshield. My mind is racing, trying to assemble the jagged pieces of this new reality. The journal. It wasn't just a confession, it was a blueprint. He mentioned a Dr. Alistair Finch, a diagnostic specialist at a smaller clinic across town. He wrote about Finch's faint positives, a steady stream of patients whose initial test results were ambiguous enough to be spun into a terminal diagnosis. My father didn't just get lucky with misdiagnosed patients showing up at his doorstep. He had a supplier. He had a system. This wasn't a passive deception, it was an active conspiracy. And the most chilling thought begins to form, a sliver of ice in my gut. For every faint positive he accepted, for every healthy person he pretended to save, how many genuinely sick people did he have to turn away to keep his success rate perfect? How many death sentences did he sign, not with a scalpel, but with a polite, regretful letter from his admissions office? I finally reach my apartment, a small, functional space that suddenly feels like the only real place on Earth. I lock the door, then slide the deadbolt across, an absurd gesture of security against a man who could ruin my life without ever stepping foot inside. I collapse onto my sofa, the exhaustion hitting me like a physical blow. The silence of the room presses in on me, amplifying the chaos in my head. My entire life, my entire identity, has been a lie. I chose a career in medical research to be like him, to follow in the footsteps of a giant. Now I see that the path he carved was not of healing, but of profound, calculated cruelty. His words come back to me, sharp and clear. The little things are what matter most. He thought it was a warning. He thought he was telling me to be careful, to cover my tracks. He has no idea. He just handed me my mission. He's right. The details are everything, and I will find every single one. I will pull on the thread of Alistair Finch. I will unravel this whole damn thing, piece by painstaking piece. The fear is still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it's no longer in control. A new feeling is taking its place. Purpose. Cold, clear, and absolute. The first light of dawn filters through the blinds, slicing the darkness of my apartment into gray stripes. Sleep never came. Instead, I spent the night staring at the ceiling, my father's words echoing in the silence, each syllable a tiny chipping hammer against the foundation of my life. The purpose that had ignited in me last night hasn't faded. It is cooled, hardened into something heavy and real. This isn't a flash of anger. It's a conviction. I sit up, the journal open on the coffee table in front of me. Its leather cover seems to absorb the weak morning light, holding its secrets in the dark grain. Last night, I read it as a son. This morning, I will read it as a scientist. I will treat my father's life as a data set, his cruelty as a variable to be isolated and understood. The methodology is all that matters now. My laptop hums to life, its glow a sterile white against the gloom. Dr. Alistair Finch. The search results are predictably mundane. A professional headshot shows a man in his late 50s with thinning hair, kind eyes, and a slightly wary smile. He's affiliated with the Oakside Diagnostic Clinic, a small private facility on the industrial side of the river. There are a few patient reviews, all glowing. Dr. Finch was the only one who listened, one reads. He found what everyone else missed. It's sickeningly perfect. This man isn't some back-alley quack. He's a respected specialist, a pillar of a smaller, less scrutinized community.
He's the ideal partner in crime, competent, discreet, and utterly invisible to the circles my father moves in. The digital trail is a dead end, a carefully curated image of benign professionalism. It's another perfect facade, and I know with chilling certainty that my father would accept nothing less. I turn my attention back to the journal, forcing myself to ignore the elegant, familiar slant of the handwriting and focus on the information it contains. I scan past the self-aggrandizing entries about his unparalleled diagnostic intuition and look for the name, Finch. It appears every few pages, a recurring motif in this symphony of deceit. It's never explicit. There's no, Finch sent me another healthy one today. It's all coded. AF confirmed the preliminary markers. Follow-up on the Oakside referral. And then I see it. Tucked into the margins of an entry from 3 years ago, next to a note about a successful surgery on a city councilman, is a small, almost insignificant string of characters. Ref OAK 3B7P. It's a patient identifier, but it doesn't match the formatting for our hospital. It's Finch's. My father, the man obsessed with details, with precision, made a mistake. He jotted down a note, a link between his world and Finch's, and he left it there. A single thread, dangling in plain sight. The drive to Oakside feels like a journey into another life. I leave my own car in my apartment garage, taking a rideshare to a coffee shop a few blocks away from the clinic. Every reflection in the window feels like a pair of eyes. I imagine my father's network, the tendrils of his influence, reaching into every corner of the city. He doesn't need to follow me himself. He has 1,000 grateful patients, powerful friends, people who would report seeing his son in a part of town he had no business being in. The paranoia is a physical thing, a prickling on my skin, the constant urge to look over my shoulder. I pull the hood of my sweatshirt up, burying my hands in my pockets as I walk the final 2 blocks. The air here smells different. A mix of diesel from the nearby port and roasting coffee from a local plant. It's a world away from the manicured lawns and quiet money of my father's neighborhood. The Oakside Diagnostic Clinic is a 2-story brick building, unassuming and clean. It looks more like a small-town dentist's office than the epicenter of a monstrous conspiracy. I take a seat on a park bench across the street, shielded by the branches of a large oak tree, and I watch. For the first hour, it's exactly what you'd expect. People walk in looking anxious, some walk out looking relieved, others with a heavier burden than they carried in. I see Dr. Finch through the large front window once, clapping a patient on the shoulder, his face a mask of gentle empathy. The performance is flawless. I feel a surge of disgust so profound it nearly makes me sick. These people are coming to him for answers, for truth. They are placing their lives, their hopes, their deepest fears into his hands, and he is sorting them like cards in a deck. The healthy ones go to my father for a miracle. The sick ones? Where do they go? I feel my resolve wavering, the sheer scale of the deception threatening to swallow me. This is impossible. They're too careful. I'm just one person, a son with a stolen book, sitting on a park bench like a common spy. As I'm about to give up, to retreat back to the safety of my apartment and rethink everything, a sleek black town car pulls up to the curb in front of the clinic. It doesn't have a hospital logo, but I recognize the driver. It's a man named Marcus, one of my father's personal assistants, a man who handles his discreet errands. Marcus gets out, holding a thin, sealed manila envelope. He doesn't go through the front door. He walks down the side alley of the clinic, disappearing from view. A minute later, he reappears, empty-handed, gets back in the car, and drives away. My breath catches in my chest.
It's not a digital file. It's not an official transfer. It's a handoff, a back channel, a physical exchange of information, hidden from any official record. My father's obsession with details cuts both ways. He doesn't trust the digital world. He needs a hard copy. And I just saw the delivery route. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. The delivery route. It's not just a route. It's a vulnerability. A single, tangible point of failure in an otherwise flawless system. For a moment, I'm paralyzed on the bench, the implications washing over me in a cold wave. To get that envelope would be to hold a piece of the conspiracy in my hands. Not a memory, not a digital ghost, but a physical list of names, of lives being sorted and sold. The thought is terrifying, and it's the most hopeful thing I've felt in days. The black car is gone, but its image is burned into my mind. I stay on the bench for another hour, the initial shock giving way to a cold, methodical process of thought. I can't just watch anymore. I have to act. I have to get one of those envelopes. The next 3 days are a blur of tension and caffeine. My life shrinks to the confines of my car, parked a block away from the clinic, and the park bench across the street. I buy a pair of cheap binoculars from a pawn shop, the kind you'd take to a baseball game. From my new vantage point, I feel like a predator, a feeling that churns in my stomach. I watch Dr. Finch's gentle pantomime of compassion through the clinic window. I watch the patients come and go. But mostly, I watch the alley. I learn its rhythm. A bakery truck makes a delivery at 6 a.m. A sanitation crew comes through around noon. Teenagers use it as a shortcut after school. And twice more on Tuesday and Friday, just after 10 a.m., the black town car arrives. Marcus gets out, always with the same thin manila envelope, always disappearing for no more than 60 seconds. It's a routine, and routines can be broken. The paranoia is a constant companion. Every person who glances at my car feels like an agent of my father. I sleep in 2-hour increments, haunted by dreams of being discovered. I eat tasteless protein bars and drink lukewarm coffee from a thermos. I am shedding my old life, my old self, layer by layer. The son, the medical resident, the person who trusted the world, they're all fading, replaced by this hollow-eyed observer, hunched in the driver's seat of a nondescript sedan. On the 4th day, a Thursday, I don't go to the clinic. I stay in my apartment and I plan. I can't use force. Marcus is a big man, and a physical confrontation would be unpredictable and loud. I need a distraction, something that pulls his attention, his entire focus, for just a few seconds. Something that seems like a random, unfortunate accident. My plan is dangerously simple, relying on timing and luck. I buy a stack of old textbooks, a tattered cardboard box, and a stained trench coat from a thrift store. I look in the mirror and barely recognize the man looking back. He's thinner, his eyes are shadowed, and there's a frantic energy behind them. He looks like someone on the edge, which is perfect. The next morning, Friday, I'm in position an hour early. Not on the bench, but standing on the corner by the alley entrance, the box of heavy books cradled in my arms. The trench coat feels like a costume, both hiding me and making me feel ridiculously conspicuous. My hands are sweating, the cardboard growing slick under my fingers. My breath is shallow, my senses on a razor's edge. I can hear the city's heartbeat, the rumble of a distant train, the hiss of bus brakes, the murmur of conversations I can't make out. At 10:03 a.m., the black town car arrives to the curb. My own heart seems to stop. This is it. The world narrows to this single stretch of pavement. Marcus gets out, the manila envelope in his left hand.
He moves with an unhurried confidence that makes my stomach clench. He glances around, a brief, professional sweep of his surroundings. His eyes pass right over me, dismissing me as just another piece of the city's scenery. He turns toward the alley. Now. I take 2 steps forward, as if to cross his path, and then I lurch, my ankle twisting theatrically. The box tilts and the heavy textbooks cascade onto the sidewalk with a series of loud, slapping thuds. "Ah, damn it!" I yell, a cocktail of real and feigned frustration in my voice. For a perfect, beautiful second, it works exactly as I'd planned. Marcus flinches at the noise. His head snaps toward me, his professional calm broken by irritation. His focus is entirely on the clumsy idiot who just dropped a pile of books at his feet. In that instant of distraction, as he's shaking his head and stepping around the mess, I move. My right hand, hidden in the pocket of my coat, is already holding a nearly identical manila envelope I prepared last night, one filled with blank sheets of paper. In a single fluid motion born of pure adrenaline, my left hand snakes out, plucking the real envelope from his loosened grip as my right hand presses the fake one against his side. It's a pickpocket swap, a magic trick fueled by desperation. He barely registers the contact, his mind's still on the books, on the delay. I have it. I have it in my hand, tucked inside my coat. It takes less than a second. But that second stretches into an eternity. He takes another step, then he pauses. Something is wrong. The weight, the texture, some subconscious signal of the switch registers in his brain. He stops dead, halfway into the alley, and slowly his head begins to turn back toward me. His eyes, dark and flat, begin to move. In that infinitesimal fraction of a second, before his brain can fully process the discrepancy, before suspicion can harden into certainty, my body makes the decision for me. I don't apologize. I don't try to bluff my way out. I run. I abandon the scattered books, the carefully constructed persona of a clumsy intellectual, and I bolt, shoving past a woman with a stroller, the apology dying in my throat. The envelope is clutched in my hand, pressed flat against my stomach inside the coat, a talisman of terrible truth. I don't look back, but I can hear him. The sharp, indignant curse, followed by the heavy, determined thud of dress shoes on pavement. He's faster than I expected. The city, which moments ago was a backdrop, is now an obstacle course. I weave through the river of pedestrians, their faces a blur of surprise and annoyance. My lungs are already starting to burn, a testament to years spent in libraries and labs, not on running tracks. The trench coat feels like a lead blanket, trapping heat and restricting my movement. I risk a glance over my shoulder. Marcus is closing the distance, his face a mask of cold fury. He's not shouting, not drawing attention. He is a predator, focused and silent, and I am his only prey. Panic claws at my throat. He's going to catch me. He's going to drag me back into the shadows of my father's world, and I will simply disappear. I see an alley and duck into it, the stench of wet garbage and stale beer hitting me like a physical blow. I scramble over a chain-link fence, my hands tearing on the metal, and drop hard on the other side, my ankle screaming in protest. I'm in a parking garage now, the screech of tires echoing in the concrete space. I don't slow down. I sprint up a ramp, my breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. I burst out onto another street, disoriented, the sun blindingly bright. And then I see it, a block away. A subway entrance, a dark mouth leading into the belly of the city. A chance. I pour every last ounce of my remaining energy into a final, desperate sprint. I vault the turnstile, ignoring the blaring alarm and the shouts of a transit worker. I can hear Marcus behind me, now closer, his presence a wave of pressure at my back.
A train is on the platform, its doors chiming, preparing to depart. It's now or never. I throw myself forward, a clumsy, sprawling launch, and squeeze through the closing doors. They clamp shut behind me with a pneumatic hiss, trapping a piece of my coat. I rip it free just as the train lurches into motion. Through the grimy window, I see him on the platform, his chest heaving, his hand balled into a fist. Our eyes lock for a single terrifying moment, and in his, I see not just anger, but the cold promise of retribution. Then the station lights are gone, and we are swallowed by the tunnel's darkness. I collapse onto a plastic seat, my body trembling uncontrollably. The other passengers give me a wide berth, staring at the disheveled, wild-eyed man gasping for air. The adrenaline begins to recede, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep terror. He saw my face. He knows what I look like. My apartment, my car, my entire life. It's all compromised. I'm a ghost now, a man on the run with a single, flimsy manila envelope that has cost me everything. After several stops, moving through neighborhoods I don't recognize, I get off. I find a public library, an anonymous sanctuary of silence and books. I lock myself in a stall in the men's restroom, the smell of disinfectant doing little to calm my frayed nerves. My hands are shaking so badly it takes me 3 tries to tear open the flap. Inside, clipped together, are 5 pages. It's a list. Patient names, their ID numbers, and their supposed diagnoses. Pancreatic cancer, inoperable brain tumors, liver failure, the kind of death sentences my father was famous for revoking. But next to each name is a second column, this one filled with neat, clinical handwriting I recognize immediately as Dr. Finch's. The words are a quiet litany of fraud. Benign cyst, scar tissue, non-malignant polyp, misread imaging. Every single patient, a life saved not by a miracle surgery, but by the correction of a fabricated error. At the bottom of the final page, a short, handwritten note from Finch to my father. All 20 candidates confirmed viable for the protocol, awaiting transfer authorization. Congratulations on another successful quarter. It wasn't just a sham, it was a business model, and I was holding the quarterly report. The cheap paper felt flimsy, almost weightless, a stark contrast to the monstrous gravity of the words. I read the list again, and then a third time, as if repetition could somehow alter its meaning. Viable for the protocol. Another successful quarter. The bile rose in my throat, hot and acidic. This wasn't a secret sin, a single terrible compromise my father had made. This was a system, a well-oiled machine of deception, humming along quarter after quarter, processing human lives as data points on a spreadsheet. The 20 names on these pages weren't patients, they were inventory. They were the raw material for his godlike reputation, their real, benign conditions, a resource to be exploited. I folded the papers with trembling hands, the crisp edges feeling sharp as razors against my skin. The man on the subway platform, Marcus, wasn't just a guard dog. He was an account manager, sent to retrieve a sensitive financial report. And I had just stolen it. My first coherent thought wasn't about justice or exposure. It was about survival. This physical document was a death sentence. As long as it existed only in this form, I was a target with a bullseye pinned to my chest. I had to destroy the original, but not before I made the information indestructible. I flushed the toilet, a useless, reflexive action to cover the sound of my own ragged breathing, and slipped out of the stall. The library was quiet, a cathedral of hushed reverence that felt like a mockery of my internal chaos. I found the public computer section, a row of outdated desktops occupied by students and the homeless. I sat at a vacant terminal, the worn keyboard cool beneath my fingertips. The feeling of being watched was a physical sensation, a prickling on the back of my neck. I kept my head down, my movements small and deliberate. The library's flatbed scanner whirred to life with a grinding noise that sounded, to my frayed nerves, like a siren. One by one, I fed the pages onto the glass. Each flash of the scanning lamp felt like a lightning strike, illuminating my face, my crime, my terror for the whole world to see. I saved the files as high-resolution images, my mouse clicks unnaturally loud in the silence. I created a new, anonymous email address, a jumble of letters and numbers with no connection to my real name, and sent the files to myself. Then, I uploaded them to 3 separate, encrypted cloud storage accounts, each with a different password I'd have to burn into my memory. Redundancy. It was the only armor I had. When it was done, I went through the computer's history, deleting every trace of my activity, clearing the cache, running a disk cleanup utility I found buried in the system tools. It was a flimsy precaution, but it was all I could do. Finally, I took the original pages back to the restroom, tore them into the smallest possible pieces, and flushed them away, watching the vortex of water swallow the evidence of my father's sins. Stepping back out onto the street was like emerging into a different world. The sun was lower, casting long, menacing shadows that seemed to writhe and reach for me. The city was no longer an anonymous sea of faces. It was a web, and I could feel my father, the spider, sitting at its center, every vibration of my movement telegraphing my location back to him. Every suited man who glanced in my direction sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. A black sedan idling at a curb became an unmarked surveillance vehicle. I was a ghost, but I was a haunted one, and the phantoms were real. I walked for hours with no destination, letting the rhythm of my steps be the only constant in a universe that had completely unraveled. I couldn't go to the police. My father wasn't just a surgeon. He was a philanthropist, a civic leader, a man with connections that ran like deep roots through the city's foundations. They would see a distraught son making wild accusations against a beloved public figure. They would call him, and that would be the end. I needed someone outside his sphere of influence, someone he couldn't control, couldn't buy, couldn't intimidate. The memories surfaced from years ago. A dinner party at our house. My father holding a glass of wine, his face tight with a rare, undisguised contempt. He was ranting about a journalist, a muckraker, who had written a scathing series on a hospital board my father sat on. A parasite, he spat, the word dripping with venom. A bottom feeder, who gets off on tearing down good people for a headline. A parasite, a bottom feeder. To my father, those were insults. To me, right now, they sounded like qualifications. Alistair Graves, the name was a lifeline. My wallet held a few $100s in cash. In a small, grimy electronics shop in a neighborhood I'd never seen before, I bought the cheapest burner phone they had. The transaction felt illicit, the act of peeling bills from my wallet, a final severance from the life of credit cards and digital trails I had always known. I walked to a small, neglected park as dusk settled, the sky bruising from orange to a deep purple. I sat on a cold metal bench, the plastic packaging of the phone crinkling in my hand. Powering it on, the cheap, tinny jingle it played was the sound of a door slamming shut on my old life. I found the number for the newspaper Graves worked for online and called the main switchboard. My voice was a dry rasp when I asked for his extension. It went to voicemail. For a moment, I froze, the carefully rehearsed words vanishing from my mind. Then the desperation took over. "Mr. Graves," I began, my voice low and urgent, a stranger's voice. "You don't know me, but I have proof of a story. A big one. It involves Dr. Julian Croft. I have documents. They're real." I paused, my breath catching in my throat. "He's my father." I ended the call, my thumb pressing down on the button with finality. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant wail of a siren. I had thrown my message in a bottle into the blackest of oceans. Now all I could do was wait and see if it would ever be found. The minutes that followed the call stretched into an eternity of silent, screaming paranoia.
I sat on that park bench until the cold of the metal seeped through my jeans, my eyes scanning the encroaching darkness for figures that weren't there. The burner phone in my hand felt impossibly heavy, a direct line to either salvation or destruction. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't go home. I walked until my legs ached, finding a nondescript motel on the edge of the city, the kind with flickering neon and peeling paint that promised anonymity. I paid in cash, giving a fake name that felt clumsy and foreign on my tongue. The room smelled of stale smoke and bleach, a sterile purgatory. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, the phone placed on the nightstand like a religious artifact, and I watched it, waiting for it to light up and deliver my fate. Sleep was impossible. Every distant siren, every footstep in the hallway was him. It was Marcus. They were coming. When the phone finally vibrated, its cheap motor buzzing aggressively against the wood, my heart seized in my chest. It was an unknown number. My hand trembled as I answered, my throat too dry to speak. The voice on the other end was gravelly, impatient, steeped in cynicism. Graves? I found my voice, a weak imitation of its former self. I'm the one who called, about Dr. Croft. There was a pause, the sound of him breathing, probably lighting a cigarette. Kid, I get a dozen calls a day from cranks with conspiracy theories. You said you have documents. What kind of documents? I took a steadying breath, the air in the motel room thick and suffocating. Patient intake and screening reports, internal financial projections linked to a specific protocol. I gave him the key, the phrase I had seen repeated, the one that had turned my stomach inside out. The files are coded. The phrase he uses for the misdiagnosed patients is viable for the protocol. The silence in the other end was different now. It was no longer dismissive. It was the sound of a predator catching a scent. Where are you? He asked, his tone all business. We met 2 hours later, at 3 a.m, in a 24-hour diner that smelled of burnt coffee and grease. It was his choice, public but empty enough to be private. Alistair Graves looked exactly like my father had described him, a bottom feeder. He was rumpled and tired, with deep lines etched around his eyes that spoke of too many late nights and too much bad news. But those eyes were sharp, missing nothing. He didn't offer a handshake. He just slid into the booth opposite me and said, "Show me." I slid a small, encrypted USB drive across the sticky tabletop. I'd bought it at the same time as the phone, another piece of my new, untraceable life. He took it without a word, his gaze fixed on me, weighing me, judging me. "It's all there," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Everything I could find." He nodded slowly, pocketing the drive. "If this is real," he said, his voice low, "your life is about to become a circus. You understand that, right? There's no going back." I looked out the window at the empty, rain-slicked street. My life was already over. I just didn't know it yet. The first article dropped 48 hours later. It was an earthquake. The headline was a masterpiece of journalistic aggression, a direct assault on the gleaming fortress of my father's reputation. The hospital issued a furious denial. My father's PR team called it a baseless smear campaign orchestrated by a disgruntled reporter. But Graves was relentless. He had done more than just publish my scans. He had found a former administrative assistant who had been fired for asking too many questions. He had an anonymous source from the hospital's billing department. He built a wall of evidence around my father, brick by painstaking brick. I watched it all from my motel room, the television a constant flickering portal into the demolition of my own world. News vans were permanently parked outside my father's pristine mansion. Reporters shouted his name as he walked, stony-faced, from his car to his front door. The god had begun to bleed, and the sharks were circling. He found me on the 5th day. I don't know how. Private investigators, surveillance on the few friends I had, it didn't matter. He was a man of infinite resources, and I was his son. He simply appeared outside my motel room door, looking smaller than I had ever seen him, yet radiating an aura of cold, concentrated rage. He didn't shout, he didn't plead, he just looked at me, his eyes hollowed out by the public inferno. "You have destroyed me," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You have destroyed our family. For what? For a lie?" I finally found the strength to look him in the eye. "It was your lie, Dad." A flicker of something wild and desperate ignited in his gaze. "Lie? I saved them! Every single person on that list was scheduled for a major, life-altering surgery they did not need. I spared them the scalpel, the recovery, the risk of infection, the astronomical cost. I took their fear and gave them a miracle. What I did was a mercy." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am the only one who had the courage to do what was necessary. I was a god to them. And you were jealous. A weak, pathetic boy who could never measure up, so you decided to tear it all down." He was arrested the next morning. I watched it on the news, a live feed from a helicopter. The man who had commanded operating theaters and boardrooms was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of stone. The empire was in ruins, his licenses were revoked, the hospital was facing a tidal wave of lawsuits, and the Croft procedure became a synonym for medical fraud. I walked out of that motel that day and never looked back. I am a ghost now, living under a new name in a city where no one knows my face. I carry the weight of what I did every single day, the son who immolated his own father. But in the quiet moments, in the dead of night, his final words from that motel room echo in my mind. He was a monster, a narcissist who built a legacy on deceit. But he was right about one thing. Every patient he treated was a person who was spared a traumatic, unnecessary, and potentially fatal surgery. He built his throne on a foundation of lies, but in doing so, he shielded dozens of people from real harm. So I have to ask you, can a lie that saves a life ever truly be a sin? Let us know in the comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. I post new stories every day.